Gen Z has more college degrees per capita than any generation before them, more bachelor's degrees than boomers, more master's degrees than Gen the 10th, more student debt than anyone in recorded American history. And somehow the median 25-year-old in 2026 has a lower net worth than their parents did at the same age. Adjusted for inflation, lower. They went to school, they did the internships, they built the LinkedIn profile, they did everything the adults told them to do, and they are flat broke. Not broke like I can't afford a vacation broke. Broke like I have $12,000 in a savings account and $60,000 in student loans and I feel rich broke. How does that happen? How do you optimize an entire generation for education and end up with the most financially stuck group of young people in modern history? That is the question, and the answer is weirder than you think. We're going to explain how the credential machine works, why it stopped paying out, and why most people are still feeding quarters into it. The central metaphor here is a vending machine. Old, heavy, chrome plated. You've seen it. You put money in, you press the button, you get the thing. For about 40 years, the credential vending machine worked perfectly. You put in 4 years of tuition, you pressed the button labeled middle class, and you got the thing. Stable job, house by 30, pension by 65. The machine worked, everybody could see it working. Parents used it, their friends used it, it was reliable. And then sometime in the early 2000s, quietly, without any announcement, the machine stopped giving out what it used to give out. But nobody told the people standing in line, so they kept feeding quarters in. Here is the first thing most people misunderstand. They think the credential machine broke because of lazy students, or because degrees got watered down, or because Gen Z doesn't work hard enough. That framing is wrong. Not slightly wrong. Fundamentally wrong. The machine didn't break because of the people using it. It broke because the prize inside changed. The button still says middle class. The process still takes 4 years. The cost actually went up significantly. But what comes out is different now. And nobody updated the label. Let me give you a number that should bother you. In 1994, the average cost of a 4-year public university in America was roughly $10,000 per year, including room and board. In 2026, that same education costs about $32,000 per year. That's a 300% increase. Meanwhile, inflation adjusted wages for college graduates entering the workforce have gone up somewhere around 40% over the same period. You do that math and the machine is charging you 3 times as much to give you 40% more product. That's not a deal, that's a trap. And it's a trap that 2 generations of well-meaning parents aggressively push their children into because the machine used to work when they were young. Here is the second thing people misunderstand. Education debt isn't like a mortgage. A mortgage is attached to an asset that appreciates. You borrow $400,000 to buy a house, the house goes up in value, worst case you sell it. Student debt is attached to your future earning potential, which is invisible, speculative, and completely illiquid. You can't sell your journalism degree if things go sideways. You just own the debt for 20 years at a fixed interest rate, while inflation slowly eats whatever you make. And here's the really dark part. You cannot discharge student debt in bankruptcy in the United States. The government made sure of that, which means the machine doesn't just take your money, it takes a portion of your future income and there is almost no exit. Now you might be thinking, okay, but people who study high value fields are fine. Engineers, doctors, programmers, they're doing well. And yes, to a point, but even that logic is getting complicated. The average software engineer entering the workforce in 2026 is making around $95,000 a year in a mid-tier city. Sounds solid. Until you rent a 2-bedroom apartment for $2,100 a month, pay federal and state taxes that take roughly 30% of your income, start repaying $68,000 in student loans, buy groceries, insure your car, and try to save something. After all of that, you might accumulate $800 to $1,000 a month in actual savings, which means buying a house in that same mid-tier city priced at around $350,000 with a 20% down payment requirement will take you roughly 9 years of perfect financial discipline. 9 years. If nothing goes wrong, that is the current math. And that math is why Gen Z's home ownership rate at 25 is the lowest it has been for any generation in the post-war era. This is where the credential machine metaphor gets darker. The machine didn't just stop giving out what it promised, it created a second problem. It kept enough people believing in it to make the line longer. Because here's how vending machines work. If the machine fails to give you a snack 1 out of 10 times, you don't stop using the machine, you just press the button again. You tap the glass, you put more money in. Behavioral psychologists call this variable reinforcement. It's the same mechanism that makes slot machines addictive. The machine occasionally pays out just enough to keep the line moving. A few people get the high-paying job right after graduation. Enough people tell that story loudly enough that the myth survives. The machine is still there. It still says middle class on the button, and the line keeps growing. If you found the first two layers useful, consider subscribing. I put out new videos regularly and they all follow the same structure, no hype, just the mechanism. It costs you nothing and it keeps this kind of content coming. Here is where it gets counterintuitive. The credential machine failing is not the real problem. The real problem is that most people diagnose the failure wrong. The popular diagnosis inside Gen Z spaces online is that the system is rigged, billionaires stole everything, and the solution is policy change. I'm not going to argue politics, but I will tell you that as a system-level diagnosis, that explanation is incomplete in a way that keeps the people who believe it financially stuck, because it treats wealth as a fixed pie that somebody took, rather than as a dynamic system where positioning and structure determine who accumulates. And when you believe the pie is fixed and already stolen, your options are to either demand it back politically or give up. Neither of those is a functional personal finance strategy. The accurate diagnosis is different. Here it is. The credential machine worked because it was once aligned with actual economic leverage. A degree in 1980 meant access to a profession that required that profession could not be outsourced, and the supply of graduates was low enough that employers competed for them. Three variables in alignment. Cost was low. Supply was constrained. Degree had functional monopoly access to the profession. Remove any one of those three variables and the machine pays out less. Remove all three and it pays out almost nothing while still charging full price. That is what happened. Cost exploded, supply of graduates tripled, and the profession stopped requiring degrees the way they once did because the internet made knowledge cheap and certification programs emerged. The alignment broke, the machine kept running, and nobody sent a memo. Let me walk you through a mini case study to make this concrete. Imagine two people, call them Marcus and Daniel, both 22 years old in 2022. Marcus goes to a mid-tier university, studies business, graduates in 2026 with a degree, a $54,000 salary offer at a regional company, and $62,000 in student debt at a 6.5% interest rate. His minimum monthly payment is around $700. His take-home after taxes is roughly $3,500 per month. After rent, food, transport, and loan payments, he saves about $400 to $600 per month. He's disciplined, he does everything right. By 30, he has about $40,000 in savings and investments. His student debt is down to around $45,000. His net worth is roughly negative $5,000. He's 30 years old and his net worth is negative. Daniel does not go to university. He spends 6 months learning a technical skill, specifically cloud infrastructure. He takes some online certification courses that cost him in total around $3,000, paid for by working part-time. At 22, he starts freelancing. First year, he makes $31,000. Second year, $58,000. Third year, he lands a 6-month contract at a mid-sized tech company for $82,000 annualized. By 26, he has zero debt, around $55,000 in investments, and he's been building his network in a specific technical niche for 4 years. His net worth at 26 is roughly $60,000. By 30, assuming modest investing and continued income growth, he's sitting somewhere around $140,000 to $160,000 in actual net worth. Same starting age, different machine, 45 years of built-in financial lag for Marcus through no fault of his own. He did exactly what everyone told him to do. The machine just doesn't work the way it did. That gap, that $160,000 versus negative $5,000 difference, doesn't come from intelligence or work ethic. It comes from which system each person plugged into and when. That is the entire point. One comedic cutaway, there is a version of this story where Marcus's parents look at the Daniel scenario and say, but Daniel doesn't have a backup plan. The backup plan they're referring to is the degree. The thing Marcus has $62,000 of debt for. The thing that produced a negative net worth. That is the backup plan. Cool. Now here is the third escalation, and this one is the one that surprises most people. Gen Z is not just paying for credentials that lost value. They are paying for them at a time when the asset class that wealth is stored in, specifically real estate, has been appreciating faster than wages for 20 consecutive years. This creates a structural compounding trap. Every year that a young person delays accumulating real assets while servicing credential debt, the price of those real assets goes up. The gap widens automatically. It's not static. It's accelerating. In 2005, the average house in the United States cost about $220,000. Today it is pushing $330,000. Meanwhile, the wages that would service that mortgage have grown by maybe 30 to 40% over the same period. The house is 50% more expensive, the income is 40% higher. The math is tighter every year, and the generation spending the most time servicing educational debt before entering the asset market is walking into a gap that widens by default. There is a concept in economics called the asset wage divergence. It basically describes the phenomenon where the price of assets grows faster than the income from labor. When that happens for long enough, people who own assets become wealthier automatically, and people who only own their labor income fall behind relatively, even if their nominal wages increase. Gen Z entered the workforce at the peak of this divergence, and the credential machine delayed their ability to start owning anything by 4 to 8 years during a period when the divergence was accelerating. The timing, not the effort, is the primary variable. Most people never frame it this way. They frame it as ambition, degree quality, or hustle. It's mostly timing and structure. Second comedic cutaway, the suggested solution to all of this, by the way, from most financial advice content aimed at Gen Z, is to cut out avocado toast and make your coffee at home. The math on that is cutting about $40 a month from your expenses in a market where you're structurally $200,000 behind on the asset gap. Groundbreaking advice, truly. Here is the fourth escalation, and this is where I want to be precise because it's the part most people get wrong even when they understand everything else. The credential machine failing doesn't mean education is worthless. It means undifferentiated education combined with debt combined with delayed market entry is wealth destroying. Those are three separate variables, and most people conflate them into one thing. If you remove the debt, a degree can still be useful. If you choose an education that produces real leverage, meaning it gives you access to pricing power, professional monopoly, or network effects, it still works. The machine isn't universally broken. It's broken specifically for people who treat it as a generic wealth-building device when it was only ever useful as a specific access mechanism. A medical degree still works. A law degree from a top school still works. A generic 4-year liberal arts degree from a mid-tier school at full freight. That's 3 levers pulled in the wrong direction simultaneously. High cost, low differentiation, long time to market. That combination is almost always destructive. And here is the real punchline, the thing that connects back to where we started. The reason Gen Z is both the most educated and the poorest is not because education became valueless. It is because the culture around education never updated its model. The credential machine story, put in good education and get out financial security, was accurate for a specific window of time under specific economic conditions. Those conditions changed, the story didn't, and a generation was raised on a map that no longer matches the territory. They did what the map said, they followed every instruction, they ended up in a forest with no road. That is not a moral failure, that is a systems failure, and the system pointed the incentives in the wrong direction, and a generation followed those incentives perfectly. So what do you actually do with this? 3 things, not 10. Not a framework with a clever acronym. 3 things. First, separate education from credential debt. They are not the same thing. Education, meaning actually acquiring skills and knowledge that produce leverage, is still one of the highest return activities available to a 20-year-old. Credential debt, meaning borrowing money to purchase a certificate whose market value is uncertain, is a financial product. Treat it like one. Run the actual numbers before you buy it. Expected lifetime income premium from the degree minus total cost of debt with interest minus the 4-year opportunity cost of not being in the market. If that number is positive, proceed. If it is negative or unclear, reconsider. Most people never do that math. They just go because that's what you do. Second, understand the asset wage divergence and position yourself accordingly as early as possible. This means entering the asset market, specifically equities and real estate, earlier than feels comfortable, with less capital than feels sufficient. A 22-year-old putting $300 a month into a broad index fund and holding it is not going to feel like a meaningful financial decision. Compounded over 20 years, that $300 a month becomes somewhere around $220,000, assuming historical average returns. That's not financial freedom, but it is the difference between a 42-year-old with options and a 42-year-old without any. The timing of when you start owning assets matters more than most people intuitively feel it does. The divergence rewards early positioning and punishes delay. Third, and this is the one that sounds simple but isn't, attack pricing power over income volume. Most financial advice for young people focuses on earning more. Work more hours, get promoted, add a side hustle. And volume does matter. But pricing power, meaning your ability to charge more per unit of your time or output, is the variable that compounds. A freelancer who charges $40 an hour for 8 hours a day is not in the same financial system as a specialist who charges $400 an hour for 2 hours a day. Same total dollars. Radically different trajectory because the specialist has room to raise prices, has leverage over their time, and is building reputation in a direction that increases their pricing power further. Undifferentiated volume work does not do that. You want to be building in a direction where the market increasingly cannot replace you, not in a direction where you are one of 1,000 people with the same output. Gen Z is not failing because they are weak or soft or distracted. They are navigating a machine that was mislabeled. The label still says middle class, the button still works. What comes out is just different now. And the sooner you stop pressing the same button expecting the same result, the sooner you can find a machine that actually pays out. If you want to keep getting this kind of breakdown, subscribe. I make these for people who want the mechanism, not the motivation.